Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. On Fridays, we talk about the product owner role in Scrum. We talk about patterns and anti-patterns that relate to ours and the team's collaboration with the product owner. And we've also put together a course to help you navigate that relationship. There's 18 modules, nearly 8 hours of tools, techniques, videos, handouts, presentations you can use to help you and your team work better with your product owner. The course is available at bit.ly/coach-your-PO. All lowercase, all one word. That's bit.ly/coach-your-PO. And now, on to the show, the Product Owner Show. TGIF, everybody. Today's Friday, and we have with us, for the last time, but still for one more time, Jeremia Riedel. Hey, Jeremia, welcome back.
Glad to be back, Vasco.
So, Fridays are the Product Owner Day. And, of course, we talk about product owners because they are a critical partner for our own success that we were talking about yesterday. Without a good collaboration with product owners, we're probably not going to succeed either. So let's dive into that. We'll talk about a great PO and what they look like later on. But for us to get started, share with us what was potentially the worst product owner anti-pattern you've witnessed in your career, Jeremia.
I believe one of the baddest perceptions how the role of a product owner could be lived is the one as a requirement manager. So if back in the days, there was like one of those POs, and he didn't really get like what a product owner really means. So basically, he was interacting as a stakeholder manager also, and he worked closely with the customer. But the only thing that he really did was like to get like the requirements from the customer, and he took like those requirements and he just he didn't even translate. He just mentioned those requirements, put them like into stories, into the backlog, and just like did whatever the customer said. And to me, the PO role is so much more than a requirement manager and serving as a proxy between the customer and the development team. This could also be like, for example, like with the customer, or this could also be like for the management. So a PO.
So almost like a broken telephone. Is that what you're describing?
It's basically just like a telephone.
Yeah. So that's actually a very good point. But let's explore this. Why is this wrong? Because obviously somebody's got to do that work, right? Like somebody needs to listen to the customers and to the stakeholders and translate that. But what was missing in that translation process?
So to me, like a PO has like, he's not only working with the customer, right? He has like different input channels that he has to kind of like integrate. And what he has to do is he has to, of course, like get like the customer input, customer feedback. He has to work with also like internal stakeholders and see that like the company vision, mission, like that they are also in view. And of course, he has also to take a look into market trends. What are the product trends? What are technology trends? What are the new things that we can also integrate into the product development? And if he kind of like gets all this input, and he can create like a product vision out of it. And that's basically the product vision to me is personally just a translation of all those different influences.
Yeah. So let me see if I understand you correctly, because I think that translation may not be enough to describe that. So what you said is the product owner must have multiple input channels. So not just the customer, right? Which makes sense because there's also stakeholders, other teams, whatever that might be, right? And then you said the role of the PO is to translate this into something that the team can work on. And I'm guessing here you mean, put it in a language the team can understand, not translate like language necessarily, but like, move from business vocabulary to technical vocabulary as an example, or translate keywords into something that makes sense inside the system that the team is working on, and so on and so forth. But there was one part that you didn't talk about, and probably because it's obvious for you already, but I want to highlight, which is that integrating all of that feedback requires a different skill than translation. It also requires the skill of synthesis, right? Like bringing multiple, potentially even conflicting views of what the product should be into something that makes sense, that is holistic, that integrates that input, but is not any of those inputs. It's something better, right? Like that aspect of synthesis, which I usually assign to the vision work, right? Like synthesizing what the greater vision is also something that I think is a key responsibility of the product owner. What do you think about that?
I think synthesis is like the correct word. Maybe I wasn't really able to express it in the perfect words, and I think you summarized it quite good. And I think, of course, everything all the input that he or she creates, they end up like in a nice product vision, which is engaging, which gives direction, which is kind of like a translation, and not translation, but a synthesis of like all those different influences. And you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ability is perhaps one of the characteristics of the great PO you're about to describe for us. So, Jeremiah, describe for us the best product owner you've ever worked with.
So the best product owner that I ever worked with is kind of like this product visionary. And I don't want to mention his name, but like his skill was that he had like this huge product vision, and he never worked with a backlog. So this guy just like came into like the planning, and he basically just mentioned, okay, what is the big picture? Where do we want to go? And then he cut it down, like, where are we right now? What were like the last things that we developed as a team, and what kind of like impact did it create like on the customer? And so he had like the big picture connection to the where are we right now connection. And then he kind of like broke down like this product vision into kind of like what problems on the customer side should we solve like in the next iteration. And but just mentioning like those problems that we're trying to solve, like the team had the ability to come up with solution approaches. And usually during the last 2 years, we usually work with Miro a lot, and we just put like a brainstorming. Okay, this is the problem. So what can we do on our development side to solve these problems? And this was like the best plannings that I ever participated in, because this is like the idea of Agile, really putting Agile into practice, because you have like the feedback right away, you have like the big picture, and you just look for the why and the problems you want to solve, and you just come up with brainstorming, and afterwards we translated those kind of like brainstorming topics we identified, and then put them like into user stories.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, this is I think an undervalued and underappreciated skill of a product owner, which is to work from vision. Because in my mind, and as you illustrated in how you described it, a product owner that is firm on their vision, they understand the vision, they understand the context of the product, they understand the problems we're trying to solve, is always able to break down a very large direction, like a visionary statement, into something concrete we can do right now. And is also able to answer questions of detail, right? Like when a developer comes up, hey, we could do this way, or we could do this that way. Which one is better for the customer? And then the product owner can bring that back to their understanding of the problem and say, okay, for this particular problem, this would fit better, right? Because they are always linking the day-to-day minute decision-making that we need to do with the reason why we're doing it, right? Like they're putting the vision into everything that they do. You did say something that made me curious, though. You said he never worked with the backlog. So who did? How did the team solve that challenge?
I mean, what we did was we just basically had like one backlog, like for one sprint, right? This was like the whole approach behind it, because we had like we did like upfront a lot of nice vision workshops, and we had like the vision clear. We had like this product vision canvas that we worked with, and where we was kind of like a dynamic document artifact that we kind of like adjusted if we had like new learnings, but only based on this kind of like product vision approach. We had like this planning every 2 weeks, and just used those customer problems as our plan that we would like to solve in the next 2 weeks. And then based on that, we did the brainstorming, and then we had like a sprint backlog. We didn't have like a product backlog, we just had like a sprint backlog.
That's brilliant. And one of the things that you just said, which is my approach as well, like I'm very often talking about no backlogs, or that the backlog should be very short. And the reason why I like that is exactly what you described when you started this segment, which is that the product owner always knew what he should be talking about, what was the next most important thing, and was able to answer questions from the developers because the vision was what was present all the time. One of the anti-patterns that I often see is that when we have very large backlogs, we kind of get lost in the details, right? And then when we try to answer a question, now we have to relate that to 100 other stories that were written before, perhaps even at a moment where we weren't even present, but now we need to know them because, the stories need to make sense together. But when we work from vision, maybe with other tools like Story Map, for example, where we have this holistic product view, we can really go into the details and always drive the decision from the vision.
This is basically how the requirement manager that I mentioned, like in the beginning, and like the PO as a kind of like product visionary, how they differentiate. Because if you have like this huge requirement list and you just hand it, just create like backlog items out of this requirement list, it's basically just serving as a proxy or as a broken telephone, as you mentioned before.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing these stories, Jeremiah. We're almost at the end, but before we go, do share with us, where can we find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
So, like back in the days, I started like a blog, and I haven't added anything recently. But I think like this site is Agility Explorer. I will send it to you afterwards. And I think that there will be a new Medium article from our company soon because we did like a huge team transformation thing in the last few months. So there's like a new Medium blog that I will also share on the Agility Explorer site. And you can also find me like on LinkedIn, where from time to time I'm sharing those Medium blog articles.
Absolutely. And we'll put the link to all of those in the show notes for those of you who want to get in touch. And why not ask a follow-up question from Jeremiah. Jeremiah, it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me, Vasco. It was a pleasure to be here on the show.
One more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast is over. But there's a lot more we have to share. We have developed our own membership site where you find a community of active and engaged Scrum Masters. In this site, you get access to exclusive content and get to interact with us, your podcast hosts, as well as the best Scrum Masters in the world. Join us at scrummastertoolbox.com/podcast and keep this podcast free of advertising. See you next week for one more week full of Scrum Master tips and tricks. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.